same thing, but the beauty is that it's all tied in and you've got visibility into that full execution, right? And so here you can see, hey, it ran all of these different things, provisioned all these different tasks, and then it's now pushed up into the cloud. So so what I can do here is look and see. Let's see how this one's going. It's still queued.
Yeah, this is the perfect reason why we sometimes stand up our own build agents.
Yeah. So it's still waiting. The hosted, it was it's set for a hosted build controller, but it's still not started. It's waiting for the controller to work. But what I can show you here is, I mean, you've seen the one that actually finished successfully, and it effectively when that's done, it's going to create a whole new infrastructure. It's going to have the Fabricam Fiber application and the underlying infrastructure automatically deployed to Azure.
Yeah, the technology works. You're just basically in line right now, waiting for a build agent. Exactly. So if had you used one of our own or stood up your own, this is one of the reasons why a lot of companies are standing up their own build agents, is because they simply don't have the time to wait. But for a free resource with zero installation, it's a small price to pay for that type of functionality.
Yep. Okay, so we'll kind of snap back here to tie back to the bigger story, which is, okay, so great, right? I've let's say deployed continuously to this one particular environment, but of course you've got production at a bare minimum, right? You've got somewhere you're deving against, and you got production. I mean, some people have lots of phases, and I think that's a whole nother discussion in of itself. I mean, but I would say almost in an ideal world, you would at least have a staging type of environment, which is almost identical to production, right? If you're using infrastructure as code, that helps a lot.
Sure.
And then you're going to have a production environment where the customers actually exist. So the big question, right, is how do you deal with that, right? I mean, we've only been talking about build, and that is the scope of this course, but how does that tie in to the two together? So why don't we snap to this slide to give folks a little bit of a nugget of kind of what's coming.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what you're looking at is the future dashboard of our release management product. And it's a nice grow-up story, right? If you think about it, right? I get my code in source control, and I start using infrastructure as code and good best practices for my version control. I then take that and I add automated build so that I can start doing true continuous integration. And as Davis just showed us, we can then take that continuous integration and grow it up into what we would call continuous deployment. We're continuously deploying our code to a target environment. But as you just pointed out, the first environment is very rarely the last environment into which we want to deploy. We need to take the code from that dev environment which we just deployed to. We need to then move it into a QA environment. And while we're moving it into QA, we need to modify web.config so that they point at the right locations. We need to wait for approvals by certain people in our organization to say it's okay for you to move to the next environment. We need the ability to be able to run those integration, load, and user test during a actual installation of an environment. And that doesn't happen in your build, right? Build wants to build the code, unit test the code, and it wants to drop the code for you somewhere. And we need another system that's going to be able to pick up that baton and actually run it across the finish line for us, and that is release management. It gives us the same infrastructure that we just showed you with build. So what I really like about our new release management product is that all the information that we just taught you today on build is applicable in our release system. It has the exact same agent system and architecture. It uses the exact same task library. But what it adds to our build system is the approvals, the ability to run those automated tests, and even has a rollback functionality where should something bad happen during a deployment, we can actually trigger a rollback that will start putting things back the way they were before. So in a future course, maybe David and I will be able to give you a deep dive of that product, but that takes you from what we would call continuous deployment into what I would call continuous delivery, where you're delivering that value all the way into production and all the environments in between.
Yeah. So and I know you already said this, but I want to hit on it again, which is that if you're watching this course and you start to make investments in this newer build system, that's going to have like next to 100%, if not 100%, immediate like translation into your release management pipeline, right? You're not going to have to recreate these same tasks that you have in a totally different way. It's like take the same task, move it now into a full release management pipeline once that service is available.
Absolutely.
And then, some other things that are really kind of handy, right, with the release management pipeline that Donovan did mention is, knowing exactly where the code is at any one given time, right? So if you want to know, well, does feature X, Y, Z, is that in customers' hands or not yet? Well, actually, yeah, it's on our release, and it was on our release, 3 hours and 26 minutes ago, right?
Absolutely.
And having all that data is kind of handy for management and other folks who want to know, or even dev, right? Dev folks want to know, well, I wonder if this thing works against that new thing, right? That's there, and also being able to see, right? Again, remember we mentioned earlier about the automated testing, right? These phases, ideally, you would have increasingly larger amounts of tests leading up to production, to where, right, as you get right before production, you'd ideally have potentially hours, or could be even 24 hours or a day of tests that just, thousands of tests that run against this thing before you kind of give the final seal of approval going into production. And then also it really gives you a mechanism, right, to detect, how long did it take, right? Because one of the big things with DevOps is how fast does it take for you to go from new code, new feature or whatever, change to that source code into customers' hands. With having that full release management pipeline, you can say, well, it took this many hours and minutes, literally.
Absolutely.
And you can have a good visibility on that. So the second thing that you brought up that I think is really important to talk about here is continuous delivery.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people throw around the term CD. Well, is it continuous delivery? Is it continuous deployment? What do you mean by that?
Right.
Well, and so I think at least one way, at least that I like to think about continuous delivery is, if you were to take what we talked about of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and release management, and you were doing all of those things, you could argue, I suppose, that that's now continuous delivery.
Right. I think continuous delivery also has there's more than one environment. Yeah. Because I could use RM and I could use CD and I could still just be going to one environment. And depending on your scenario, you could still argue that's continuous delivery as well. So there's a fine line there, but to me, continuous delivery is delivering it to our end users.
Yep.
Right? We're delivering this value to our end users as quickly as we possibly can. Where just because I'm deploying constantly to our dev machine that no one's ever going to look at, that's not really delivering value to our customers. So that's how I make the distinction.
No, yeah, that's
continuous deployment and continuous delivery.
No, it's super important. Delivery equals delivery to customer, not to production-like environment. Right?
Exactly.
It's like, is the customer using that thing?
Right. Right? Am I delivering value to my customers?
That's right.
And that's what we're trying to do with DevOps.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, tangent to this is, I've seen some people say, well, we're doing continuous delivery. Okay, well, and we're doing DevOps because we're doing continuous delivery, or we're doing DevOps because we're doing continuous integration. It's like, not necessarily.
Exactly.
No, like, if you have your entire development team, and let's say they actually are doing continuous delivery, and the ops guys are there, still there around and doing something else that relates to, let's say, operational parts of the overall process, you're not doing DevOps, right? You've still got a siloed organization. You may be functioning in a very efficient manner of delivering code to production, but you've still left out the people side of the whole process, right? You're not on the same page, right? You're not having both DevOps and business be a part of the entire application lifecycle, right? That's where things break down.
There's three pillars to DevOps, right? I like to call it the 3 Ps, but the industry likes to call it tools. So I like to say it's the people, the process, and the products, right? Yeah. We need the people on board, and then we need a process that those people are going to follow. And the products, many of the products that we produce here at Microsoft are going to enable you to be able to run that process efficiently. So it's the 3 Ps of DevOps. It's the people, the process, and the products. And what I love about working at Microsoft is we're the only vendor on the planet that has everything that you need to actually have a full enterprise DevOps pipeline. It's an amazing time for us.
Yeah.
No matter what technology that you're using, no matter what platform that you're targeting, you can use everything that we have to build that pipeline.
Absolutely, and of course we have the options, right? So if you want to plug in you have existing investments in existing things, as you've already seen how we've got a lot of integration points. But if you want to do it all in-house, well, great. So I want to, because this is the last module, we really want to close again on the resources that we have available, because there's no way you can learn it all inside of the scope of this course. Up top we have DevOps practices and tools. That leads to a DevOps homepage, which has a lot of different information, including the infrastructure as code white paper. We kind of very lightly touched on infrastructure as code. If you're having a hard time, maybe justifying to your boss on why do I even care about doing infrastructure as code, well, the Forrester white paper that we worked with Forrester on, it is not specific to Microsoft, right? Infrastructure as code is generic. That's a good one to dive into on the business value. The next one, technical resources for practitioners. That leads to a number of different courses, of which this one should be listed also on there, is the DevOps MVA, or DevOps AK.MS, DevOps Learn should also get you there too. A lot of different courses that relate to DevOps, different DevOps practices inside of Microsoft. Trial VSO, of course, we've been talking VSO the whole time. That's super easy, AK.MS VSO trial. There is Talk DevOps on Twitter, and then we also have, of course, the Parts Unlimited applications up on GitHub that you've seen earlier. So,
absolutely.
So with that, thanks for watching our course. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
And feel free to hit Donovan Ian up on Twitter if you liked it and whatnot. So, thanks so much.